The Spotlight, shining a light on podcasts and videos that have caught our attention.
Hi and welcome to The Spotlight. My name is Jen Spiker and today I'm highlighting part of a recent conversation that Phil Edwards had with his guest co-host on Sunday Morning Together. As the name suggests, Sunday Morning Together is heard every Sunday on Vision and available on demand in the Vision app. Each week, Phil spends time unpacking his guests' stories, including their faith journey. For those unable to attend a local church service, the program includes a time of communion and a 5-minute sermon. A recent guest co-host on Sunday Morning Together was Pastor Danny Guglielmucci, and Phil first asked Pastor Danny about the background to his nickname, Danny Gug.
The Spotlight with Jen Spiker.
Is that a nickname you've given yourself, or is this a bit of family history here with the Guglielmucci family?
Well, we migrated to Australia in 1960. I was only 4 years old, and Guglielmucci, believe it or not, version of the word Williamson, because Guglielmo is William, and Guglielmucci is like Williamson, son of William.
Okay.
And we just shortened it and say, hey, Danny Gug's fine.
That's very. I remember my mum used to call eggs Gug. So
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So I've used that term with my kids sometimes, and they just look at me funny, like a Gug. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So, well, we're going to hear a bit of your story. You've just given us a little insight into some of your background, but you've been in ministry for many, many years now. Can you remember when did you start in ministry?
It would have been 1983. I went to Bible college, and straight after the end of 83, 84, I went into full-time ministry as a youth pastor. Yeah, so it's a long time ago now.
And along the way, you founded what is now known as Edge Church in Adelaide, and have been a big part of the Pentecostal church in Australia, and very influential in that space. I guess as you look back over your years of ministry, what is it that really sticks out to you? You've seen perhaps the hand of God at work in different things.
I just think when I look at my life, I don't see myself as a natural visionary. I'm a real people person. I care about people. But I think the faithfulness of God in speaking first, where he, through his word, will illuminate the direction he has for your life. And I think for me, the older I get, the greatest definition of success is just obedience. And I think for me, God faithful to me and to our family in the midst of trials, in the midst of challenges, but faithful to the dream that he put in our heart, and to now look back and see it come to pass is quite a humbling experience, but very rewarding.
We're here to do some good things this morning with my guest and co-host, Pastor Danny Guglielmucci, the founding pastor of Edge Church in Adelaide, which began in 1994. But over the last 15 years, it's spread out just a little bit. Danny, where else is Edge Church these days?
Yes, well, Edge Church, we have 2 campuses in Adelaide, a campus in Melbourne, in Burwood, Melbourne, and have a beautiful campus in Bristol, England.
Hang on. Adelaide, Melbourne and Bristol, that seems like an odd combination. What's the story? How did that come about?
Well, again, it's just amazing because at the birth of our vision, a scripture that became very powerful to me, that came to me through my devotional life, was Isaiah chapter 49. And it says, after you restored Israel, you will go to the Gentiles and then you will go to the nations. And for some reason, after one trip to the UK on a visit many, many years ago as a youth pastor, something got into my heart for that nation and it never left. And then visiting Bristol just as a visiting speaker many, many years ago, a supernatural opportunity opened up where a group of people were praying for a church to start in Bristol. And a group of senior people in that city that had been in a church that for many years now hadn't had a pastor, and they had this money that they wanted to build a church with and no pastor. They invited us to consider coming to Bristol and starting a church, and a whole lot of supernatural coincidences, no, God incidences. We knew that this was right. It was virgin birthed, I call it. It was started in the heart of God, not in the flesh. and we birthed this church that's now about 500 people in Bristol, England. We now have a property there, and it's really having a great impact on that community. So we're very, very grateful.
This is Sunday Morning Together across Australia on Vision Christian Radio.
Let's start at the beginning. Where were you born, Pastor Danny?
Yes, my parents were born in Italy, but they moved to South America, to Montevideo, Uruguay, to be missionaries and also to work. They were looking for work in southern Italy. They lived on a farm. There wasn't enough income after the Second World War. They were struggling. And so they moved to South America, where there was some church planting going on, and they wanted to be involved in that. And so I was born while they spent about a 6-year period of time in South America, and I was born during that time in the 1956. Yeah.
Okay, so in Uruguay?
Yeah, Montevideo, Uruguay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm sure that must be confusing for people when they hear your surname, very Italian.
Yes. And so there was a lot of Italians that had migrated from Italy to South America for work, and they wanted to start a bilingual group of churches with Italian people that had migrated, but also reaching the Spanish community. And so one of my uncles started a church and ended up building 22 more churches across South America.
Oh, wow.
Did an amazing work. But my dad felt the call, and my mum to move to Australia. And so at the age of 4, we arrived in Australia. I was only 4 years old and been in Australia ever since. But born to Italian parents that continually spoke Italian. So I'm really Italian, but just was born in South America. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess that means you're expressive with your hands as well, because the Italians like to do that. And it sounds to me like there's a really strong Christian heritage in your family. Do you know how far that goes back?
Yes. My grandfather became a believer just after the Second World War, where some missionaries came through southern Italy. They were in a town called Benevento, just near Naples. And a whole village, there was a revival that touched a whole village, that people came to faith and were filled with God's Spirit. And it was just an amazing supernatural work. My grandfather, as a young man, married man with kids, came to faith. Then my parents came to faith. Obviously, I'm in faith, my children and my grandchildren. So we're looking at about 5 generations.
Yeah, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you come to Australia, 4 years of age. Do you remember anything of those early years? And did you land in Adelaide or somewhere else?
Yes. We in those days, we came out on a boat where it took a month to get to Fremantle from Italy, and then we sailed to Melbourne, and from Melbourne to Adelaide on the overland train.
Right.
Because my dad had relatives in Adelaide, and it's a bit like you could call your relatives over. If you had relatives already in Australia, they could call their family over through migration. My dad had a brother here, and so we ended up in Adelaide, and most of that town in Italy migrated to Adelaide. So Adelaide's got quite a strong Italian, community.
Yeah. And those early years for you, what was it like? Because you're landing in a completely different culture, and there's a mix of cultures here. You've got the Italian heritage, born into a South American culture, and then you arrive in Australia. Was it all just a big adventure, or were there challenging times for you?
For me, it was traumatic because my parents were young enough to pick up the Spanish language fairly quickly when they were in South America. And so my first 4 years of my life, I only spoke and understood Spanish. When we arrived in Australia, my parents couldn't speak English. So they reverted back to Italian with all their family. And I didn't know Italian and I didn't know English. So my first day at school, I kicked the teacher, I screamed. I was in a bit of a mess, and they had to take me out of school until I was ready to be able to integrate into the school system. So it was pretty traumatic in those days, but because my parents only spoke to me in Italian and South American, but I'm going to school and it's only English, and so I'm not quite sure how long it took. Obviously, we got there, but it was very tough, very, very tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just reflect a little on those teenage years when you moved on, say let's go 10 years forward to when you're 14. What did life look like for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I wasn't proud of my culture that I'd been raised in because I felt like a stranger in the land. And so my mum would cook pasta and cook, beautiful Italian food, and I wouldn't eat it. I'd go to the corner store and buy a Balfour's pie or a meat pie and an Australian meat pie because I wanted to be Aussie. My mum would make those thick Italian sandwiches that today we buy in cafes and call it focaccia, and I'd take it to school and you could smell the garlic and the kids would make fun of you. And I just felt for many years in my teen years that I didn't belong anywhere. I felt this sense of I'm being made fun of for being a European. I wanted to be like the Aussies, but my parents didn't want me to be like that. And so I felt for many years that wherever I was, I didn't fit.
Yeah.
And that's why having an encounter with Christ at such a young age was the most helpful thing in my life, because without that, I don't know where I would have landed.
On the Spotlight, we've been listening to part of a conversation between Vision CEO Phil Edwards and Pastor Danny Guglielmucci from a recent Sunday morning together. I'll share more of this conversation next time, but if you can't wait, you can hear the full story, plus Danny's communion message and 5-minute sermon by tapping the podcast tab of the Vision app. Just search for Sunday Morning Together to find this and many more episodes. My name is Jen Spiker. Join me next time on The Spotlight as we hear Pastor Danny Guglielmucci share his conversion experience as an 11-year-old boy.
For more great podcasts and videos like the one featured today, check out vision.org.au or the free Vision app.